Max Thornton prided himself on being unshockable. After 15 years hauling cargo through the far reaches of colonized space, he'd seen things that would make the average Earth dweller's hair curl. He'd traded with the methane-breathing Krell, whose handshake involved exchanging small parasites that cleaned their exoskeletons. He'd shared drinks with the crystalline Vox, who absorbed alcohol through their translucent skin and glowed increasingly brighter shades of pink as they got drunk. Max considered himself a true citizen of the galaxy, comfortable with all manner of alien anatomies and customs. At 42, his once athletic frame had softened slightly around the middle, but he still cut an imposing figure with his broad shoulders and the confident stride of someone who had navigated both legitimate business deals and shadier arrangements with equal success. The network of fine lines around his gray eyes spoke of years squinting at distant stars through viewports and the permanent tan of someone who'd visited 100 different suns. Port Nexus bustled with its usual chaos as Max strode through its crowded main concourse. The massive space station served as the primary transit hub for 3 major systems, a melting pot of species and cultures where anything and everything could be bought, sold, or experienced for the right price. After a grueling 3-week haul from the mining colonies in the SETI sector, Max had just one agenda for the evening: a stiff drink at Cosmic Junction, his favorite establishment in the entertainment district. The bar's entrance shimmered with a holographic sign displaying its name in 12 different languages. Inside, the lighting was dim but comfortable, with floating luminescent orbs that adjusted their brightness based on patron preference. Species from across known space mingled at the gleaming bar made from salvaged starship hull plates, while servers of various anatomical configurations weaved between tables with practiced grace. Max claimed his usual corner stool at the bar, nodding to Drex, the 6-armed hexapod bartender who had been serving him for the better part of a decade. The usual, Captain Thornton? Drex's voice rumbled from somewhere within his armored thorax. "Make it a double," Max replied, sliding his credit chip across the counter. "Long haul from SETI." Drex manipulated the bottles with 4 hands while using his remaining 2 to input the transaction. Within moments, a tumbler of amber liquid that smelled faintly of caramel and ozone, Martian bourbon, aged in vacuum-sealed barrels, appeared before Max. He was midway through his second drink when he noticed her. Even in the cosmopolitan environment of Port Nexus, she stood out. Her skin was a shifting palette of emerald and jade tones that seemed to ripple with subtle iridescence under the bar's ambient lighting. Her features were humanoid enough to be strikingly beautiful by human standards. High cheekbones, large almond-shaped eyes, and full lips, but with an alien quality that was undeniably exotic. Her hair, if that's what it was, resembled fine filaments of spun silver that moved slightly despite the absence of any breeze. Max recognized her species immediately, Narian. Their homeworld, Nylar, had established diplomatic relations with Earth nearly 30 years ago, but their people remained relatively rare in human space. Known for their advanced biological sciences and somewhat isolationist policies, Narians were typically seen only as diplomats or academic researchers. As if sensing his gaze, she turned slightly on her stool, those remarkable eyes, with vertical pupils like a cat's, but in a striking violet hue, meeting his. The corners of her lips lifted in what seemed to be a universal gesture of friendly acknowledgement across many sentient species. Max raised his glass slightly in return. To his surprise, she gathered her drink, something vibrant and blue that occasionally emitted small puffs of luminescent vapor, and moved gracefully to the empty stool beside him. "You've been watching me," she stated matter-of-factly, her voice melodic with an accent that elongated her vowels pleasantly. Most humans try to be more subtle about it. Max chuckled, caught off guard by her directness. "Sorry about that. I don't see many Narians this far from the diplomatic sector, and I don't often see humans who can identify my species at a glance." She extended a slender hand with 6 fingers, each tipped with a small, perfectly oval nail in the same emerald shade as her skin. "I'm Nyla Naren." "Max Thornton," he replied, taking her hand. Her skin was warm to the touch, with a texture like fine suede. Cargo hauler, occasional smuggler of goods with complicated terror situations, and apparently a terrible spy. Her laughter was like chimes in a gentle breeze. How refreshing to meet someone so candid about their professional ambiguities. She took a sip of her blue concoction. And what brings a cargo hauler with a knowledge of xenobiology to Port Nexus? Just dropped off mining equipment from Earth. As for the xenobiology, Max shrugged. 15 years in space teaches you to recognize who you're dealing with. It's just good business. He studied her more openly now that they were engaged in conversation. What about you? Not many Narians venture outside your system without an official purpose. I'm a xenobiologist, actually. Her eyes sparkled with amusement at his surprised expression. Specializing in comparative physiology between sentient species, particularly regarding biological compatibility. Compatibility? Max raised an eyebrow. Cross-species interactions of all kinds, she clarified, those remarkable eyes holding his. Cultural, social, physiological, reproductive. Max nearly choked on his bourbon. That's specific. It's fascinating work, Nyla continued, seemingly oblivious to his momentary discomfort. Humans are of particular interest in my field. Your species shows remarkable adaptive potential for genetic compatibility with several humanoid races. More than most, in fact. I'm not sure if I should be flattered or concerned that my species is known for being universally compatible, Max replied with a wry smile. It's a compliment, Nyla assured him. It speaks to the adaptability of your genetic code. My current research focuses on the success rates of human-alien partnerships, both platonic and intimate. She leaned slightly closer. It's why I noticed you watching me. I've developed a particular sensitivity to human interest. The conversation flowed as naturally as starlight after that initial moment of surprise. Nyla was brilliant, articulate, and possessed a dry wit that had Max laughing more than he had in months. He found himself sharing stories of his travels, the legitimate ones, at least, while she described the challenges of being one of the few Narians who advocated for greater integration with other species. My father is an ambassador, she explained after they'd moved to a quieter booth in the corner. He sees interspecies relations as necessary diplomacy. I see them as the future of galactic society. Her fingers played with the stem of her glass. It's caused some tension. Family expectations can be a gravitational force harder to escape than a black hole. Max agreed, thinking of his own parents' disappointment when he abandoned his promising career in the Earth fleet for the freedom of independent hauling. Precisely. Nyla's eyes lit up. You understand perfectly. It's why I chose Port Nexus for my research. Far enough from Nyla's influence, cosmopolitan enough to provide ample research opportunities, and just shady enough that no one asks too many questions. Max finished for her with a knowing smile. Their eyes met again, and Max felt something shift in the atmosphere between them. Nyla's silver hair seemed to move more animatedly, and the iridescent patterns on her skin flowed in hypnotic waves. Would you be interested in continuing our cultural exchange somewhere more private? She asked, her voice dropping to a lower register that sent an unexpected thrill through Max. My apartment has an excellent view of the spaceport. We could watch the ships while continuing our conversation. Max considered his options. He wasn't naive. The invitation clearly extended beyond mere conversation. Intimate encounters with aliens weren't uncommon for him. Space was lonely, and compatibility, as Nyla had pointed out, wasn't usually an issue with the right preparations. Still, he'd never been with a Narian before. Curiosity won out, as it often did with Max. I'd love to see that view, he replied, signaling to Drex for the check. Nyla's apartment was in the upper levels of the station's exclusive Azure Tower, confirming Max's suspicion that her family connections afforded her certain privileges despite her rebellious career choice. The living space was elegantly appointed with a mixture of Earth furniture and what he assumed were Nylarian artifacts, flowing sculptures that seemed almost alive, hovering slightly above their pedestals. True to her word, the main room featured a wall-to-wall viewport that offered a spectacular panorama of Port Nexus's massive docking arrays. Ships of all configurations moved in a carefully choreographed ballet against the backdrop of distant stars and the blue-green curve of Nexus Prime, the habitable moon the station orbited. "This is quite a step up from the cargo hauler accommodations I'm used to," Max admitted, accepting a glass of something amber from a suspended serving droid that hovered discreetly near what appeared to be a well-stocked bar. "One of the few advantages of being the ambassador's daughter," Nyla replied, stepping beside him at the viewport. "The research grant doesn't hurt, either." She clinked her glass against his. "To new experiences and cultural exchanges." "To compatibility," Max returned, with a smile. The drink was excellent, something like whiskey, but with complex undernotes of spices he couldn't identify. As they sipped and talked, the professional distance that had characterized their earlier conversation at the bar gradually dissolved. Nyla moved closer, her shoulder occasionally brushing against his arm as she pointed out specific vessels in the spaceport. "That's the Centauri corvette," she noted, indicating a sleek, predatory-looking craft with distinctive swept-back wings. "Beautiful engineering." "Beautiful but temperamental," Max replied. "Piloted one once during a blockade run near the rim. Handles like a dream until you push past 90% thrust. Then the stabilizers start to whine like a hungry Venusian swamp cat." She laughed, and the sound seemed to vibrate through him. "You'll have to tell me that story sometime." "Sometime soon," he suggested, setting down his empty glass on a nearby floating tray. His hand tentatively found the small of her back. Through the silky material of her dress, her skin felt warm and subtly textured. Nyla turned to face him, those remarkable violet eyes now inches from his own. "I should clarify something, Max," she said, her voice serious but not unwelcoming. "While my research is academic, my interest in you tonight is entirely personal." "I was hoping that might be the case," he admitted. "Good," she whispered, closing the remaining distance between them. Her lips were softer than he'd expected, warm and yielding against his own. The kiss deepened, and Max was surprised to discover that despite the differences in their species, the fundamentals of physical attraction seemed remarkably universal. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. Nyla broke the kiss first. Her breathing noticeably quickened. The iridescent patterns on her skin pulsed more rapidly, creating waves of color that seemed to flow toward wherever his hands made contact. "Your quarters are mine?" she asked with a mischievous smile. "Yours are definitely nicer," Max replied, glancing toward what he assumed was the bedroom. Nyla took his hand, leading him through the spacious apartment to a room dominated by a large, circular bed that appeared to hover slightly above the floor. The lighting adjusted automatically as they entered, dimming to a soft azure glow that complemented the continuing stellar panorama visible through the room's curved viewport. Their clothing found its way to the floor through an unhurried exploration. Max discovered that Narian anatomy, while distinctly alien in its coloration and subtle textures, was fundamentally compatible with human physiology, perhaps even more so than he might have anticipated. Nyla's skin seemed to respond to his touch with waves of bioluminescence that followed his fingertips like ripples in water. "Your skin," he murmured in wonder as they lay on the bed. "Sensitive to touch and emotion," she explained, her voice breathy as his hands continued their exploration. "It's how we communicate intimacy." Max found himself entranced by her responses, the way her silver hair moved of its own accord, sometimes wrapping gently around his wrists as if encouraging his touch in certain places. The differences in their physiologies became an adventure rather than an obstacle, each discovery bringing new delights. As their passion built, Max found himself thoroughly lost in the experience, all thoughts of species differences forgotten in the universal language of desire. Nyla proved both enthusiastic and creative, guiding him when needed and following his lead at other times. It was in the midst of their most intimate moment, as both approached the height of pleasure, that Max first heard it. At first, he wasn't sure what he was hearing, a rhythmic, wet sound that seemed out of place in the symphony of their shared passion. As Nyla arched beneath him, the sound grew louder, an unmistakable slurping noise that reminded him bizarrely of someone enthusiastically eating noodles. Asterisk slurp. 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 Asterisk. Max paused, momentarily confused. Did you hear that? Nyla, her eyes half closed in pleasure, merely pulled him closer. Don't stop, she whispered. We're perfectly aligned. He tried to continue, but the sound persisted, growing louder and more insistent. It was coming from... With dawning horror, Max realized the sound was coming from Nyla herself, more specifically from where their bodies joined. The slurping grew more forceful, accompanied by a sensation of suction that was decidedly different from anything he'd experienced with any species. Asterisk slurp. Slurp. Asterisk. It reminded him of a vacuum malfunction he'd once had in his cargo hold. That same relentless, mechanical pull that had nearly sucked a crate of valuable Jovian crystals into the filter system. Panic seized him as his imagination conjured increasingly terrifying possibilities of what might be happening. What had she said about her research? Compatibility? Was this some kind of biological sampling? Asterisk slurp. 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 Asterisk. With a yelp that he would later deny, sounded like a frightened child, Max launched himself backward, literally rolling off the bed and onto the floor with a heavy thud. Max! Nyla sat up, confusion evident on her face. What's wrong? But Max was already scrambling for his clothes, grabbing whatever items were closest without regard for whether they were his pants or his shirt. I need to... Words failed him as he hopped on one foot, tried to force it through what he belatedly realized was the arm of his shirt. Max, wait. Let me explain. Nyla started to rise from the bed, her bioluminescence now pulsing in patterns that seemed to indicate concern. No explanation needed. Max finally managed to get his pants on, though he was now wearing his shirt backward and was missing a sock. Just remembered, urgent delivery, cargo waiting, can't be late. The words tumbled out in a panic stream as he backed toward the door. The slurping sound had stopped, but the memory of it echoed in his ears like a nightmare. Whatever was happening, whatever that was, Max's unshockable facade had finally met its match. I'll call you, he lied, already halfway through the bedroom door. Great time. Really. Gotta go. He fled through the apartment, passing the bemused serving droid, and practically punched the door panel in his haste to escape. The corridor outside seemed blissfully normal, though several well-dressed Tellurians turned to stare at the disheveled human racing past them with one shoe on and his shirt inside out. It wasn't until Max reached the relative safety of the public lift that he realized he was still clutching one of his boots in his hand rather than wearing it, and that his heart was pounding like he'd just outrun a Krell hunter drone. Apartment assistant, he called out to the lift's AI interface, his voice still shaky. Information query. How may I assist you, sir? The pleasant, genderless voice responded. Max glanced nervously over his shoulder, half expecting to see Nyla in pursuit. Narian reproductive biology. Specifically, any information on, sounds during mating. There was a brief pause as the AI processed the unusual request. Accessing xenobiology database. Another pause. Narian intimate physiology includes a feature known as reproductive resonance. During moments of peak arousal, Narian reproductive organs create a vacuum-like effect to ensure optimal genetic material transfer. This is accompanied by a distinctive sound often compared by humans to fluid consumption or the earth dish spaghetti. The process is entirely natural and harmless, though it can be disconcerting to non-Narian partners unfamiliar with the phenomenon. Max stared at the ceiling in disbelief. And this isn't in the standard diplomatic briefings, because Narian officials have deemed such intimate biological details unnecessary for general diplomatic relations. The AI responded primly. Would you like me to continue with additional information about Narian reproductive processes? No, Max said hastily. No, that's quite enough, thank you. The lift doors opened at the main concourse level, and Max stumbled out, still trying to process what had just happened. He managed to get his remaining boot on and oriented his shirt correctly before making his way to a public comm terminal. With unsteady fingers, he punched in a familiar code sequence. After several moments, the screen flickered to life, revealing the bearded face of Hank Reeves, Max's longtime friend and occasional business partner. Max! Hank's expression shifted from surprise to amusement as he took in Max's disheveled appearance. You look like you just escaped a Dresselian prison riot. What happened? Narian woman, Max said tersely. Did you know they? He struggled to find appropriate words. Hank's booming laughter filled the terminal booth. Oh my God, you got the spaghetti slurp, didn't you? Max's jaw dropped. You knew about this? Had a similar experience about 2 years ago on Proxima Station, Hank confirmed, wiping tears of mirth from his eyes. Xenobiologist named Tara. Beautiful woman, fascinating conversationalist. And then he made an exaggerated slurping sound that caused Max to flinch. Why didn't you warn me? Max demanded, indignation temporarily overriding his embarrassment. And miss out on this moment. Hank grinned wickedly. Not a chance. Besides, it's not like you call me up for approval before every romantic encounter. How was I supposed to know you'd hook up with a Narian? Max ran a hand through his tousled hair. So it's normal? Not dangerous. Completely normal for them, Hank assured him. Scared the hell out of me too. But Tara explained it afterward. It's just their biology, man. Like how Arcturians change color during sex, or how Venerians emit that buzzing sound. Narians? Slurp, Max said flatly. Narians slurp, Hank confirmed, breaking into fresh laughter. So what did you do? Please tell me you didn't. I ran, Max admitted, his face burning. Grabbed my clothes and ran like the station was decompressing. Hank's howls of laughter were so loud that Max had to lower the volume on the terminal. Oh, that poor woman. Did you even explain? Before Max could answer, he sent someone behind him. Turning slowly, he found himself face to face with Nyla. She was fully dressed now in an elegant jumpsuit of iridescent blue, but her expression was a complex mixture of concern, embarrassment, and something that might have been hurt. I'll call you back, Max said to Hank, disconnecting before his friend could protest. Max, Nyla said quietly, her silver hair moving languidly around her face. May I explain? Max swallowed hard, acutely aware of how ridiculous he must look and how badly he had behaved. I think the apartment AI covered the basics, he admitted. I'm sorry for running away like that. It was just unexpected. I should have warned you, she said, her voice gentle. It was unprofessional of me. As a xenobiologist, I should have anticipated your reaction. Max felt his embarrassment deepen. Not your fault. I'm supposed to be this seasoned space traveler, comfortable with all species and customs, and then I bolt at the first unusual sound. A small smile played at the corners of Nyla's lips. It is rather distinctive, isn't it? Despite himself, Max chuckled. That's one way to put it. Would you like to come back to my apartment? Nyla asked. Just to talk, she added quickly. I think we both could use a better understanding of our respective physiologies before attempting any further research. Max considered the offer. His initial panic had subsided, replaced by his characteristically curiosity and, if he was honest with himself, a lingering attraction to this remarkable woman. I'd like that, he decided. But maybe we could start with dinner this time. Nyla's smile widened, her skin shimmering with what Max now recognized as pleasure. I know an excellent restaurant on level 8 that specializes in cross-species cuisine. Perfect, Max said, offering his arm in a gentlemanly gesture that belied his still rumpled appearance. But maybe I should stop by my ship and change first? That might be advisable, Nyla agreed with a light laugh. Your shirt is still backward. Max looked down and groaned, quickly adjusting his clothing. Not my finest moment. On the contrary, Nyla said as they walked toward the docking bay where Max's ship was berthed. It's refreshing to meet someone so genuine in their reactions. Most aliens I've encountered try to pretend they're not startled by Narian biology. By the time they reached Max's ship, a well-maintained but clearly aging cargo hauler named the Stellar Drift, their conversation had returned to the easy rhythm they'd established at the bar. Max quickly changed into fresh clothes while Nyla waited in the ship's small common area, examining the collection of souvenirs Max had gathered from various worlds. Over dinner at the Galactic Palette, a restaurant where the chef, a six-armed hexapod like Drex, prepared dishes modified to suit the palates and digestive requirements of a dozen different species, they talked more openly about their respective biologies, cultures, and personal histories. "So your reproductive resonance," Max began after their main course had been cleared. "The slurping," Nyla supplied helpfully, a twinkle in her violet eyes. "Right. That's completely normal for your species." Nyla nodded. "It's how our bodies ensure genetic material is properly positioned for optimal fertilization. The vacuum effect creates a pathway through our rather complex reproductive tract." She tilted her head, studying him. "I sometimes forget how direct the human reproductive process is by comparison. And the sound, a byproduct of the vacuum process," she explained. "It's considered rather attractive on Nyla. The more resonant the sound, the more compatible the pairing is thought to be." Max felt the heat rise in his face. "So, when I ran, you fled from what my people would consider a significant compliment," Nyla confirmed, though her tone was amused rather than accusatory. "Our resonance was particularly strong. It's quite rare with non-Narians." "I'm honored," Max said, meaning it despite his lingering embarrassment. "And sorry again for my reaction." Nyla reached across the table to touch his hand, her 6 fingers fitting surprisingly well around his 5. "Cultural misunderstandings are inevitable, Max. What matters is how we resolve them." As they continued talking, Max found himself increasingly drawn to her intelligence, her openness, and her clear passion for understanding other species. By the time they finished their dessert, a neutral option of synthesized fruit that was safe for both human and Narian consumption, Max had made his decision. "I'd like to try again," he said quietly. "If you're still interested." Nyla's skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that Max was beginning to recognize as happiness. "I like that too, but perhaps we should take things a bit more slowly this time." They returned to her apartment, but rather than immediately resuming where they'd left off, they spent hours talking. Nyla showed him her research, explaining her fascination with cross-species compatibility and her hope that greater understanding would lead to more acceptance and integration between different civilizations. In turn, Max shared stories of his travels, the wonders and dangers he'd encountered in the far reaches of explored space, and his dreams of someday owning a fleet of cargo vessels instead of just the solitary stellar drift. When they finally made their way to the bedroom again, it was with a deeper understanding and appreciation of each other's differences. This time, when the distinctive slurping sound began, Max was prepared. Though he couldn't help a small involuntary flinch, he found that with foreknowledge, the sound was just another fascinating aspect of Narian physiology rather than a cause for alarm. Afterward, as they lay together watching the ships moving through the spaceport beyond the viewport, Nyla traced patterns on his chest with her 6-fingered hand. "You're full of surprises, Max Thornton," she murmured. "How so?" he asked, feeling more content than he had in longer than he could remember. "Most humans wouldn't have come back," she said. "Their embarrassment would have overridden their curiosity." Max grinned, pulling her closer. "I've always been told my curiosity would get me into trouble someday. I guess today it got me out of it instead." Over the next 3 weeks, Max found himself extending his stay at Port Nexus far beyond his original schedule. The cargo he was supposed to pick up on Vidian Prime could wait, he decided. For the first time in years, someone had captured his interest more than the next payload or the next port. He and Nyla fell into an easy routine. During the day, she would continue her research at the xenobiology lab in the station's academic sector, while Max handled maintenance on the stellar drift and took on small, local delivery jobs to maintain his income. In the evenings, they would explore the station's diverse entertainment options or simply enjoy each other's company in Nyla's apartment. Max found himself increasingly fascinated by Narian culture as Nyla shared more about her homeworld. Nyla was a planet of sprawling biological cities, where buildings were grown rather than constructed, and technology was seamlessly integrated with living tissue. Narians had mastered genetic engineering centuries before humans had even developed space travel, modifying their own biology to better suit their environment rather than reshaping their world to accommodate them. That's why our compatibility with other species is so high. Nyla explained one evening as they shared a meal she had prepared from specially imported Nilarian ingredients. Our ancestors engineered adaptability into our genetic code, anticipating eventual contact with other intelligent life. Foresight that puts human planning to shame, Max observed, sampling a blue-green vegetable that tasted surprisingly like bell pepper despite its alien appearance. We have our limitations, Nyla countered. Our biological focus means we lag behind in mechanical technologies. We might never have developed interstellar travel without the Arcturians making contact first. Their relationship deepened beyond the physical, though that aspect remained a source of mutual delight. Max found that once he'd adjusted to the distinctive sounds of Narian intimacy, it became simply another part of their connection, sometimes even a source of shared amusement. It was during their 4th week together that an unexpected message arrived on Max's personal communicator. A cargo run to the far-flung Cygnus sector, notoriously difficult to access due to its positioning near an unstable wormhole, with a payout substantial enough to put Max within reach of his dream of purchasing a second vessel. "This is a major opportunity," he told Nyla that evening, showing her the contract details. "Cygnus only opens for transport 12 days a year when a wormhole stabilizes. Miss the window, and you're waiting another Terran Standard year." "How long would you be gone?" she asked, her silver hair moving more slowly than usual, a sign, Max had learned, of concern or sadness. "A month, maybe slightly longer depending on the wormhole conditions for the return journey," he replied. "It's a long haul, but the payout is worth it." Nyla was quiet for a moment, her skin pulsing with subtle patterns that Max couldn't quite interpret. "When do you have to leave?" "That's the problem," Max said, running a hand through his hair. "The departure window opens tomorrow, and my ship registration for Cygnus access expires at the end of this cycle. I need to file for renewal immediately, but the waiting period is typically 2 weeks unless you have connections in the sector authority." A slow smile spread across Nyla's face. Would the daughter of the Nilarian ambassador to the United Sectors constitute a connection? Max blinked in surprise. "You could help with the registration? My father may disapprove of my career choices, but he's never rescinded my diplomatic access codes," Nyla confirmed. "The Sector Authority mainframe doesn't care about family drama. It only recognizes authorization levels." Within hours, Nyla had arranged for an expedited renewal of Max's registration, ensuring he could make the departure window for Cygnus. As they said their goodbyes the next morning in the Stellar Drift's docking bay, Max felt an uncharacteristic tightness in his chest. "It's only a month," he assured her, holding her close. "I'll be back before you know it." "I'll hold you to that promise," Nyla replied, her silver hair gently wrapping around his wrists in what he'd come to recognize as an affectionate gesture. "I have research that should keep me busy in the meantime. Try not to terrify any other unsuspecting humans while I'm gone," Max teased, earning a playful swat on his arm. "You've ruined me for other test subjects," she retorted with a smile. "Safe journey, Max." Their final kiss lingered, neither wanting to be the first to pull away. Eventually, the automated docking system announced the final boarding call, forcing them to part. 1 month, Max repeated, backing toward his ship's entry ramp. "I promise." As the Stellar Drift pulled away from Port Nexus, Max found himself already counting the days until his return. 2 weeks into Max's journey, Nyla sat in the examination room of Dr. Clark, the station's chief xenophysician, staring at the results displayed on the holographic interface. "You're absolutely certain?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Clark, a human woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and the patient demeanor of someone who had dealt with every conceivable medical situation across dozens of species, nodded confidently. "The readings are unmistakable," she confirmed. "You're pregnant, approximately 2 weeks along based on the developmental markers. The embryo shows distinctive markers of both Narian and human DNA." Nyla's hand drifted unconsciously to her abdomen. "This shouldn't be possible without genetic modification procedures." The natural compatibility rate between humans and Narians is less than 0.01% without medical intervention. And yet, here we are, Dr. Clark replied with a small smile. The universe occasionally surprises even those who study it for a living. She pulled up another holographic display. What's particularly interesting is the accelerated development. Based on the current growth rate, I estimate a complete gestation period of approximately 8 to 10 weeks rather than the standard Narian 20-week cycle or human 40-week cycle. 2 months. Nyla's eyes widened. That's unprecedented. The human genetic material appears to be accelerating the Narian developmental sequence, Dr. Clark explained. I'd like to monitor you regularly, given the unique nature of this pregnancy. We don't have much data on naturally occurring human-Narian hybrids. Nyla nodded absently, her mind racing through the implications. I need to contact Max, she murmured, more to herself than to the doctor. I'll prepare a comprehensive data packet about human genetics that you can transmit to him, Dr. Clark offered. The more information we have about the father, the better we can prepare for any potential complications. As soon as she returned to her apartment, Nyla attempted to establish communication with the stellar drift. Due to the distance and the interference from the Cygnus sector's wormhole, the connection was poor, with frequent interruptions and delays. Max, she called, seeing his pixelated image appear on the screen. Can you hear me? Nyla. His voice came through broken and distorted. Great to see you. Signal's weak. Approaching wormhole entry. Max, I have news, she pressed on, knowing their connection could fail at any moment. I'm pregnant. The baby is yours, ours. It's developing rapidly. Only about 2 months until... You're what? Max's face showed clear shock even through the poor transmission quality. How was that possible without? I don't know, she admitted. Dr. Clark says it's extremely rare, but not impossible. The pregnancy is progressing much faster than normal. We'll have a child in approximately 2 months. Static interrupted the transmission for several agonizing seconds before Max's image reappeared. 2 months? That's incredible. Are you okay? Is the baby? We're both fine, Nyla assured him. But I need your medical information for Dr. Clark. Family history, genetic conditions, anything that might affect the baby. Of course, Max nodded vigorously. I'll transmit my complete medical file. Nyla, His image froze, then dissolved into static. Coming back as soon. More interference. Damage to the transmission cut off entirely. Nyla stared at the blank screen, her silver hair moving in agitated patterns. The last fragments suggested something had happened to the stellar drift. Damage? She tried to re-establish the connection, but the communication system couldn't locate Max's ship transponder. Over the next few days, Nyla alternated between her research duties and increasingly frantic attempts to contact Max or get information about the stellar drift status. The Cygnus sector was notoriously difficult to monitor, with the wormhole's interference blocking most long-range scans. The Port Authority could only confirm that the ship had successfully entered the wormhole, but had no data on its emergence at the other side. A week after their broken communication, Nyla received Max's medical files through an automated relay system, containing a brief text message, stellar drift damaged during wormhole transit. Communications array destroyed. Currently undergoing repairs at Cygnus 4 outpost. Will return as soon as possible. Take care of yourself and our miracle. Max. The message brought both relief and new worries. Max was alive, but stuck in the far reaches of charted space with a damaged ship. Meanwhile, Nyla's pregnancy continued to progress at an alarming rate. By the 4th week, her condition was already visible, the equivalent of a 5-month human pregnancy according to Dr. Clark's measurements. It was around this time that Nyla received a message she had been dreading. Her father, Ambassador Naren, will be making an official visit to Port Nexus for diplomatic negotiations with the United Sectors Alliance. He requested her presence at a formal reception. Under normal circumstances, Nyla might have found an excuse to avoid such an event. Her relationship with her father had been strained since she chose xenobiology over diplomatic service. But now, visibly pregnant with an interspecies child, avoidance seemed impossible. She would have to face him. The reception was held in the grand atrium of the diplomatic sector, a cavernous space adorned with representative art from 50 different worlds. Nyla chose a flowing dress that partially concealed her condition, though she knew it wouldn't fool anyone who looked closely. Ambassador Tarek Naren was an imposing figure, even by Narian standards. Taller than average, with skin that shimmered in deep emerald patterns of authority and lineage, he moved through the crowd of diplomats with practiced ease, his silver hair bound in the traditional braids of high office. He spotted Nyla almost immediately, his violet eyes, so like her own, widening slightly in recognition and then narrowing as he took in her appearance. With a subtle gesture to his aides to continue without him, he made his way to her side. "Daughter," he greeted formally, touching his forehead in the traditional Narian family acknowledgement. "Your presence honors me." "Father," Nyla returned, matching the gesture. "Welcome to Port Nexus." For a moment, they stood in awkward silence, the gulf of their estrangement seeming wider than ever. Then Ambassador Naren's gaze dropped deliberately to her midsection. "You have news you haven't shared with your family," he stated, his tone carefully neutral. Nyla straightened her spine, refusing to show the nervousness she felt. "Yes, I'm expecting a child. A hybrid child. The father is human." A flicker of genuine shock passed over her father's face before his diplomatic mask returned. "This was planned? Part of your research, perhaps?" "No," Nyla admitted. "It was unexpected, but not unwelcome." Ambassador Naren guided her to a quieter corner of the atrium, away from curious ears. "Who is the father?" "His name is Max Thornton. He's a cargo hauler, currently in the Cygnus sector." "A cargo hauler," her father repeated, a subtle pattern of disappointment flowing across his skin. "And is he aware of the child?" "Yes." Nyla began, but was interrupted by a tall, hawkish Narian male who approached with deliberate purpose. Ambassador Naren, the newcomer said, bowing slightly. "Counselor Trev sends his regards and wishes to know when you intend to finalize the arrangements between our families." Nyla felt a cold dread wash over her. Counselor Trev was one of the most powerful political figures on Nyla, and his son, Vex Trev, had been suggested as a potential match for her since her adolescence, a political alliance that would strengthen both families' positions in the Nylarian High Council. "Please inform Counselor Trev that all matters remain under consideration," Ambassador Naren replied smoothly. "My aide will schedule a meeting for tomorrow." After the messenger departed, Nyla turned to her father with mounting anger. "You're still pursuing the arrangement with the Trevs? Even after I made it clear years ago that I would not participate in a political marriage. It was my hope that with time, you would recognize the value of such an alliance," her father replied stiffly. "Your current situation complicates matters, but does not necessarily preclude them. Many high-ranking families incorporate children from previous relationships." "Incorporate?" Nyla's voice rose slightly. "This is my child, father, not a political bargaining chip." Ambassador Naren's expression hardened. "You have always been willful, Nyla. Your mother indulged this trait. I have tried to channel it toward productive ends. But this," he gestured toward her abdomen, "this goes beyond rebellion into recklessness. Do you have any idea how the Trev family will react to being publicly aligned with a bloodline that includes human genetics?" "I don't care how they react," Nyla said firmly. "I'm not marrying Vex Trev. I never intended to, and this pregnancy doesn't change that. It only confirms my decision." Her father's skin darkened with anger. "Then you leave me no choice. Either you will return to Nyla immediately to resolve this situation appropriately, or you will be formally dissociated from the Naren family, with all diplomatic privileges and financial support revoked." The ultimatum hung in the air between them. Dissociation was a serious step in Narian culture, effectively removing a person from their family lineage and all its associated benefits. For Nyla, it would mean losing not only her family connection, but potentially her research funding and certainly her apartment, which was secured through diplomatic housing allocation. You would dissociate your own daughter and grandchild over political ambition? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I would dissociate a daughter who has consistently rejected her heritage and responsibilities. Yes, Ambassador Naren replied coldly. You have 3 days to decide. He turned and walked away, leaving Nyla standing alone, her hand protectively cradled over her growing child. That night, Nyla paced her apartment, her mind racing through options. Returning to Nyla was unthinkable. The Trev family would never accept her child, and the rigid social structures of her homeworld would make it nearly impossible for a humanitarian hybrid to thrive. The child would face discrimination, perhaps even medical correction, to minimize its human traits. Yet where could she go? Her research position was tied to her Narian credentials. Without her father's support, she would lose not only her funding, but potentially her right to remain on Port Nexus. In desperation, she contacted the one person she knew would understand, Hank, Max's friend who had experienced his own Narian encounter. Nyla. Hank answered, surprise evident in his bearded face. Max isn't due back for weeks. Is everything okay? No, she admitted, explaining her situation quickly. I need help, Hank. Somewhere safe to go, at least until Max returns. Hank's expression grew serious. Politics and family drama. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but every species seems to have its share of both. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. I've got contacts in the Harmony Coalition, a support network for interspecies families. They might be able to help. Within hours, Hank had arranged for Nyla to meet with a representative from the coalition, a human woman named Alara, who had married a Centaurian and raised 3 hybrid children. Your situation isn't unique, Alara assured her as they sat in a quiet tea house in the station's residential sector. We see variations of this story all the time. Families objecting to interspecies relationships, threats of disinheritance, even attempts to forcibly separate couples. What do you suggest? Nyla asked, her hand resting on her now prominent pregnancy. First, we get you somewhere safe, Alara said decisively. We have a network of safe houses throughout several sectors. Second, we document everything. Your father's threats, medical records confirming the child's health, proof of Max's acknowledgement. Building a legal case for family rights is essential if your father decides to pursue more aggressive measures. You think he would? Nyla felt a chill at the thought. Ambassador or not, parents can go to extreme lengths when they feel their lineage or reputation is at stake, Alara replied grimly. I've seen it happen even in supposedly enlightened cultures. That evening, Nyla packed essential belongings and research materials, preparing to leave her apartment for a coalition safe house. As she was finishing, a priority message arrived on her secure channel. Not from Max, but from Dr. Clark. I've been contacted by representatives of the Narian embassy. The doctor informed her, looking troubled. They're requesting your complete medical records, claiming diplomatic prerogative due to your status as the ambassador's daughter. I've declined, citing patient confidentiality, but they're threatening to escalate to station administration. My father works quickly, Nyla said bitterly. Can they force you to release the records? Not legally, Dr. Clark assured her, but they can make things very difficult. My husband is in the diplomatic corps. I'm concerned they might pressure him. Then don't resist too strongly, Nyla decided. Let them have the basic confirmation of pregnancy, but if possible, protect the detailed genetic analysis of the child. I'll do my best, Dr. Clark promised. And Nyla, be careful. Diplomatic immunity can shield people from consequences for actions that would otherwise be illegal. With that ominous warning, Nyla completed her preparations and slipped out of the apartment, leaving most of her possessions behind. Hank was waiting with a nondescript cargo hauler, its hold converted into a comfortable, if utilitarian living space. It's not the Azure Tower, he apologized as he helped her aboard, but it's off the registry grid and shielded from standard bioscans. The Coalition uses it to transport vulnerable families between safe locations. For the next several weeks, Nyla moved between 3 different safe houses within Port Nexus, never staying in one location for more than 5 days. Her pregnancy continued its accelerated development, and by the 6th week, Dr. Clark, who continued to visit her in secret, estimated she was the equivalent of a full-term human pregnancy. "The baby is developing perfectly," the doctor assured her after one examination. "A remarkable balance of human and Narian characteristics. Physically, it presents as predominantly Narian, but with human circulatory and neural patterns. Fascinating from a medical perspective and completely healthy." "And the gender?" Nyla asked, her silver hair moving gently with anticipation. "A boy," Dr. Clark confirmed with a smile. "Strong heartbeat, active movement. He'll be quite the explorer with parents like you two." Meanwhile, Ambassador Naren had made good on his threat. Nyla received formal notification of her dissociation from the Naren family, a document that struck deeper than she had expected despite her preparation. Her research funding was revoked, her academic credentials questioned, and her legal status on Port Nexus rendered uncertain. More troublingly, Ilera reported increased activity from the embassy. "They're searching for you systematically," she warned during a secure communication. "And they're not alone. There are representatives from the Trev family involved now, including private security personnel with scanning equipment not typically available to civilians." "What do they want?" Nyla wondered aloud. "Even if they found me, they can't force me to return to Nyler or marry Vex Trev." "It might not be you they're primarily interested in anymore," Ilera suggested gently. "A child of mixed heritage, especially one from a prominent Narian bloodline, would be of great interest to certain factions on your homeworld. There are rumors that the Trev family has invested heavily in genetic research related to hereditary traits." The implication was clear and chilling. If the Trevs couldn't secure a political alliance through marriage, they might settle for genetic material from Nyla's child, material that would carry Naren family traits without the contamination of human DNA. As her due date approached, Nyla grew increasingly anxious about Max's return. There had been no further communication since his brief message about the stellar drift's damage. The wormhole to Cygnus would soon close for another year, potentially stranding him far from Port Nexus when their child arrived. It was during her 8th week of pregnancy, as Nyla was being relocated to yet another safe house, that disaster struck. The transport vehicle was surrounded by 4 unmarked hovercrafts as it passed through a maintenance sector of the station. "Coalition transport. Power down and prepare for boarding," came an authoritative voice over the emergency channel. "By order of Port Security, Section 47B. Hank, who was piloting the transport, glanced back at Nyla with alarm. "That's not real port security," he muttered. "Section 47B deals with waste management, not transport interdiction." Before they could react, a localized electromagnetic pulse disabled the transport's propulsion system, leaving them drifting helplessly. Moments later, the craft shuddered as magnetic locks engaged, forcing them to dock with one of the larger hovercrafts. "We need to get you out of here," Hank said urgently, moving to a hidden compartment in the floor and retrieving a small sidearm. "There's an emergency escape pod beneath the medical berth. It's only designed for one person, but..." The outer airlock hissed as it was overridden. Nyla struggled to her feet, her advanced pregnancy making quick movement difficult. The inner door of the airlock began to cycle open. Too late. Hank grimaced, positioning himself between Nyla and the door. "Stay behind me." The door slid open to reveal 4 figures in unmarked security uniforms, led by a tall Narian male with the distinctive facial markings of the Trev family security force. Research Specialist Nyla, formerly of House Naren, the leader announced formally. "By authority of Counselor Trev, and with the consent of Ambassador Naren, you are remanded to protective custody for return to Nyler. The unborn child has been claimed as a genetic asset of House Trev under Nylarian Statute 87C. "Genetic asset?" Nyla repeated, her voice shaking with anger. "This is my child, not property to be claimed by political decree. The legal status of interspecies offspring is clear under Nylarian law," the security officer replied coldly. "Particularly when one parent is of unknown lineage and questionable genetic integrity." Hank raised his weapon. "She's not going anywhere." This is a coalition vessel under Earth Alliance protection. The leader's expression didn't change as he made a subtle gesture. One of his subordinates raised a specialized weapon and fired before Hank could react. Instead of a projectile or energy beam, it released a targeted neural disruptor that sent Hank collapsing to the floor, conscious but unable to control his muscles. No lethal force. The leader instructed as his team moved forward. The female is to be unharmed, the child protected at all costs. As they advanced, Nyla felt a sudden, sharp pain that doubled her over. A rush of fluid pooled at her feet as she grabbed the edge of a console for support. "My water broke," she gasped, another contraction seizing her almost immediately. "The baby is coming now." The security team faltered, exchanging uncertain glances. They had clearly expected to transport her to a controlled medical facility, not to deal with an imminent birth. The leader activated his communication device. "Team, to command. The subject has entered labor. Request instructions." Whatever reply he received was cut short by the sudden wail of Port Nexus emergency alarms. The entire section shuddered as impact doors began to close automatically. "Unauthorized docking detected in Maintenance Sector 8. Announced the station's automated system. Emergency protocols engaged. All personnel evacuate immediately." Through the viewport, Nyla could see station security vessels converging on their location. The leader of the Trev security team cursed in Narian. "We need to move now," he ordered his team. "Bring her aboard our vessel. We'll deliver the child en route if necessary." As two of the security officers moved toward Nyla, the outer hull of their dock craft suddenly tore open with a deafening screech of metal. Through the breach stormed a familiar figure, Max Thornton, wielding what appeared to be an industrial cutting tool, his face set in a mask of rage. Behind him came a squad of uniformed Earth Alliance Marines, weapons raised. "Step away from her," Max growled, tossing aside the cutting tool and drawing a compact blaster. I start removing limbs." The leader of the Trev team assessed the situation with cold calculation. "This vessel is operating under Nylarian diplomatic authority. Your intrusion constitutes an act of aggression against—" "Save it," Max interrupted. "I've got documentation from 3 separate agencies confirming you're operating an illegal kidnapping operation. Ambassador Naren has already been detained for questioning by station authorities." Nyla cried out as another contraction hit, stronger than the last. Max's eyes widened as he took in her condition. "Nobody's going anywhere," announced a new voice as Dr. Clark pushed past the armed standoff, medical kit in hand. "This woman is in active labor, and I'm taking charge of this situation by medical authority." She glared at both sides. "Lower your weapons unless you want to be banned from every medical facility in 12 sectors. The authority in her voice was such that both groups hesitantly complied. Dr. Clark moved swiftly to Nyla's side, helping her to lie down on the transport's medical berth. "The baby's coming fast," she informed Max as she quickly prepared her equipment. "First pregnancies aren't usually this rapid, but nothing about this has been standard." Max dropped to his knees beside Nyla, taking her hand. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The drift was more damaged than I thought. I had to appropriate a faster vessel when I got your messages about your father and the Trevs." "You stole a ship?" Nyla managed through her pain, a small smile touching her lips despite everything. "Borrowed a diplomatic courier," Max corrected with a grin. "Your father isn't the only one with connections. Turns out the Earth Alliance takes a very dim view of attempts to claim human hybrid children as genetic assets." The next hour passed in a blur of pain and focused effort for Nyla. Dr. Clark worked with calm efficiency, guiding her through the berth while Marines and Trev security personnel maintained an uneasy standoff in the adjoining compartment. Hank, recovering from the neural disruptor, coordinated with station security via comm channel. Finally, with a last push and a cry of effort, Nyla felt her child enter the world. The sound that followed wasn't the expected cry of a newborn, but rather a tiny, perfect slurping sound that caused Max to burst into surprised laughter. "He definitely takes after his mother," he said as Dr. Clark placed the infant on Nyla's chest. The baby boy was beautiful, skin a lighter shade of emerald than Nyla's, with fine wisps of silver-white hair already visible on his head. His eyes, when they briefly fluttered open, revealed pupils that were a compromise between human round and Narian vertical, giving them an oval appearance. 5 fingers on each hand, but with the slight webbing characteristic of Narians. "He's perfect," Nyla whispered, her silver hair gently wrapping around the baby in an instinctive protective gesture. "What's his name?" Max asked softly, one finger gently stroking his son's cheek. "Thura," Nyla decided. "It means courage in ancient Narian." Their moment of peace was interrupted when the leader of the Trev security team attempted to approach, only to be blocked by 2 Marines. "Under Nylarian law, that child is," he began. "Under Earth Alliance statutes, United Sectors Proclamation 12J, and about 15 other legal codes I've memorized in the past week." Max cut in coldly. "That child is our son, with full protection of mixed heritage laws. The documentation has already been filed with every relevant authority." The standoff might have escalated further, if not for the arrival of 2 final parties. Through the still-open breach came Alara from the Harmony Coalition, accompanied by a distinguished Narian male whom Nyla recognized with shock as her father. Ambassador Naren looked diminished somehow, his usual imperious bearing replaced by something that, on a human, might have been described as shame. His skin patterns were muted, his silver hair hanging loose rather than in its formal braids. "Stand down," he ordered the Trev security team. "Your mission is terminated." The leader turned in surprise. "Sir," Counselor Trev's instructions were explicit. "The genetic material is my grandson," Ambassador Naren interrupted, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority, "and no longer subject to any claim by House Trev." He approached the medical birth slowly, his eyes never leaving the small bundle in Nyla's arms. When he finally stood beside them, he seemed uncertain, a state Nyla had never witnessed in her confident, decisive father. "May I see him?" he asked quietly. After a moment's hesitation, Nyla adjusted the blanket to reveal the baby's face. Ambassador Naren's breath caught audibly. "He has your mother's brow," he said softly. "And her spirit, I suspect." The mention of Nyla's mother, who had died when Nyla was young, was unexpected. The ambassador had rarely spoken of his wife in the years since her passing. "Father," Nyla began cautiously, "what happened? Why are you here?" Ambassador Naren's skin rippled with patterns of regret and resolution. "When I learned what Counselor Trev truly intended for your child, not adoption into their family as I've been led to believe, but genetic harvesting and denial of his human heritage, I could not allow it." He looked at Max with a new respect. "Your partner's rather dramatic arrival at the embassy with a squad of Earth Alliance officials provided the leverage needed to expose Trev's plans to the High Council. And your dissociation order?" Nyla pressed. "Rescinded, if you will accept it," her father replied. "I was wrong. My ambition for our family's position blinded me to what truly matters." His gaze returned to the baby. "He is of our blood, regardless of his mixed heritage. In fact, he may represent the future that Nyla needs to embrace rather than fear." Before Nyla could respond, the baby made another tiny slurping sound, causing everyone present to look at him. Max chuckled. "Definitely takes after his mother," he repeated, squeezing Nyla's hand. Over the next few hours, the situation was gradually resolved. The Trev security team was taken into custody by Port Nexus authorities, facing charges of attempted kidnapping and operating unauthorized weapons in a civilian sector. Ambassador Naren formally recognized Theron as his grandson and legitimate heir to House Naren, effectively shielding him from any future claims by House Trev or others who might seek to exploit his unique genetics. Dr. Clark pronounced both mother and child healthy, though she insisted on transferring them to the station's medical center for observation given the unprecedented nature of the birth. 3 months later, Max, Nyla, and baby Theron stood in the main docking bay of Port Nexus, preparing to board their new vessel, a sleek diplomatic courier, officially commissioned for the newly established Interspecies Family Rights Commission, a joint initiative between Earth and Nyla. Are you sure about this? Nyla asked Max as they watched their belongings being loaded. Being a diplomatic envoy is a far cry from independent cargo hauling. Max adjusted the sleeping Naren in his arms, the baby having grown remarkably in the short time since his birth, already showing signs of both human curiosity and Narian intelligence. I'm sure, he confirmed. Besides, this ship is twice as fast as the Drift ever was, and we're still technically hauling cargo, just the diplomatic kind. Hank approached, his arm still in a sling from the confrontation with the Trev security team. All systems checked and ready, he reported. And I've installed those special acoustic dampeners in the captain's quarters. He winked at Max. So you won't be disturbed by any slurping sounds from the little one. Max laughed, while Nyla rolled her eyes, having long since grown accustomed to the jokes about Narian physiology. You know, Max said, looking down at his son, I never thought I'd say this, but that sound has become one of my favorites. Means everything's working just as it should be, even if it's considerably louder coming from a hungry infant. Nyla teased. Even then, Max confirmed, leaning over to kiss her. Our lives were quiet enough before. I wouldn't have it any other way now. As they boarded their new ship, baby Theron made a contented slurping sound in his sleep, as if in agreement with his father's sentiment. The sound echoed slightly in the entry corridor, causing the loading crew to glance up in confusion while his parents simply smiled, completely at ease with the unique symphony of their new family.